Hey everybody, Tracy Brown here, and it is time for another part of Tracy's tips. And this one is really just to share with you the Achieving Inclusion model. I forget that sometimes, even though this is called the Achieving Inclusion Summit, and quarterly we do Achieving Inclusion webinars, that some of you have never seen the Achieving Inclusion model. And so I'm just going to give you some highlights of the Achieving Inclusion model. And as you are listening and watching, I invite you to think about, oh, how do we in my organization address that element? The idea behind the Achieving Inclusion model is that there are four areas, four topics, four categories, four factors that are super important as you are prioritizing the different things that you include in your inclusion strategy. And you may notice a pattern in the models and the information I've been sharing. It really is helping you get the big picture view of what you're doing, because many times when we are developing or implementing or refining our inclusion strategy, it's easy to be reactive to some big thing that recently happened or some big challenge. And then we focus on addressing that challenge, and our strategy ends up being imbalanced. So, the four questions that I always ask myself are reflected in the strategy, the inclusion model. There are four quadrants, and like so many other models that have four quadrants, it makes it easy to remember. And in this model, all four quadrants begin with the letter A, which makes it easy for me to remember and maybe easy for you to remember as well. But there is awareness, alignment, action, and accountability. Awareness, alignment, action, and accountability. So let's talk about these for a minute. Now, you'll notice in the model there is a key question to ask yourself related to each one. For awareness, it's what do I need to know or understand about diversity and inclusion, engagement, belonging, acceptance? What do I need to know or understand? Right? And if you are responsible for a strategy that affects many people, or you're coordinating the strategy for the organization, then it's absolutely valid to say, what is it that this group of people need to know or understand about DEI? Because then that will help you know what you need to offer that would provide that increased awareness or the information that will undergird everything that they do. The challenge is that many organizations do understand how important it is to provide increased awareness. Think about it. If you've been doing this work for a while, there was a decade or so where the big thing was diversity awareness training. And I always used to ask, why do we just want people to be aware? Like, what do we want them to do with that awareness? So, so it's not that I never offered awareness training. I did if that's what the client really wanted, but I would ask the client, where is the awareness taking us? or what do you want people to do as a result of this awareness? So I will do awareness training, and then what are you going to do in the organization? So you will give people the opportunity to demonstrate their awareness. But awareness is important. It is definitely a place to begin. What do I need to know, or what do the employees, or what do is it that our members need to know or understand? Now, for most people, they want to go from awareness to action. And so they'll go start in the awareness square and then look down to action, awareness to action. Because if people know better, they'll do better, right? If people know something, they will apply it, right? Wrong on both counts. People in general, we don't move from awareness to action. Why is that? Because we get increased awareness, but we don't really know what it applies to, or why it's important, or what's in it for me beside just knowing more information. So, in the Achieving Inclusion model, we go from the awareness quadrant to the alignment quadrant. So, we go across from left to right. And the key thing to think about or ask with alignment is, what does DEI have to do with this organization's mission and priorities? Or what is it that understanding DEI or some aspect of it, by understanding it, what does it have to do with me personally achieving my goals, getting a great performance review, solving problems, serving customers? Sometimes that can be included in awareness training. In fact, I would say not recently, because many organizations are so limited in the time that they will allow for training and development. And but there was a time not all that long ago where organizations would plan for a day and a half or a 2-day session. And so in that case, yes, you can do some awareness, you can do some alignment, and you can begin to move into action. But in general, if an organization is saying, come in and do 90 minutes or come in and do 3 hours, you're not going to be able to do all aspects. So from awareness, we want to move into alignment, making sure that people can answer the question, what's in it for me, or what's in it for this organization, right? So we move into from awareness over to alignment. And when people have awareness, they have information, and they know why it's important to their success or their company's success, then you will find people begin to come up with specific ideas for action that are appropriate and that are effective. So, in the Achieving Inclusion model, we know that if you have awareness and you have alignment, then you can begin to prescribe action, or people will begin to come up with actions on their own individually or by department or team. So, the key question related to action is, What are specific things I can do or say to demonstrate awareness and to meet my goals? What are specific things I can do or say? Action is not think about, action is tangibly talk or walk the talk, right? What am I doing and what am I saying? That if someone followed me around for a month, it would be very clear to them that I am committed to the DEI initiative in my organization. So it has to be observable or experiential behavior. That is what action is. Now, if you are looking at your strategies and your programs and you are looking at what teams do or how your ERG is contributing, right? So there could be some programmatic actions. And again, you can tell the difference between programs and activities that are simply inspired by awareness, and they will be different than the ones that are inspired by awareness plus alignment. So, quadrant 3 is action. And there is always a combination of prescribed or expected actions from the organization or from leaders combined with employee or member created actions. When you have both awareness and alignment, you will then have actions that are prescribed or required, and you will have actions that are created and developed by the constituents and the key stakeholders in your organization. So I hope this is making sense for you. Feel free to make a comment in the chat, or maybe you have another way to put this in your own words, or a process or model that you use. But we want to go from awareness to alignment and then to action, and then quadrant 4, which is so hard for so many people, accountability. I cannot even count the number of organizations that I have supported on their DEI journey where they were really good with action, but there was no accountability, or there was limited accountability. And so it's no surprise that so many of us in the DEI space are constantly checking in with each other about, like, how could we measure that? Or how could we describe the prescribed actions in a way that you know it's happening? Unfortunately, many people still are just in their feelings or their beliefs, but you cannot measure what people believe except by their behavior. So that's one of the reasons, if you've been doing this work for a while, that's one of the reasons we will say, we cannot manage or tell you what to believe. But when you are working as a representative of our organization, we can prescribe and require certain behaviors because, right, the belief is technically invisible. Technically. Now, if I really am believing something, hopefully it shows up in my actions, and my passion for it is very clear, but I can't control that. What I can, quote, in air quotes, control, what I can require is respectful behavior, And then we have to have conversations in the organization about what kinds of actions are respectful and what kinds of actions are not respectful. And in our constantly changing landscape in this multicultural, multi ethnic, multi generational work environment that we are operating in, respectful changes. And the fact that we are engaging with so many different kinds of people, what I consider respectful might not match exactly, or I may not be able to anticipate. So, in the actions part and in the alignment part of this model, a lot of times what happens is we begin defining what would that look like, or we periodically take surveys from coworkers or from customers or from patients or from members to find out if we are maintaining a standard that people are experiencing as respectful. So that fourth quadrant of accountability also gets tricky because so often when we ask the question, what will I be responsible for achieving and within what time frame, it does put us in a quantitative mindset. So we start thinking of, well, what can we measure and what data do we need and who's going to collect that data and where is it going to be stored, and when people don't meet that standard, what are we going to do? Because if we say that's what has to happen and it doesn't happen, then we need to get the bad eggs out. And we get into this mindset of judgment and enforcement. But if you have spent much time with me, you know that I agree that might be 15% of the mindset, that we must enforce and eliminate anyone who's not meeting the standard. What do you do with the 85% of people who are all in, of people who want to do a really good job or want to integrate a commitment to inclusion in the way that they show up, but it's new to them? So for me, accountability, when I'm working with clients, I'm laughing because I'm remembering right before the pandemic, there was a client organization I was working with, and we were talking specifically about building in accountability. And I was going, on and on. It was probably the third conversation we had had about accountability. And in the previous two, I had talked about holding people accountable and catching them doing the right thing, holding people accountable and rewarding them for taking risks toward the desired goal. And so in this third meeting, we were again trying to finalize from our previous conversations what were we going to recommend to the executive leadership. And one of the participants, one of the VPs who was in the meeting, was like, okay, Tracy, before you even start, we know we have to find ways to reward good behavior and not just focus on the bad behavior. So you don't have to tell us that again. And everyone in the room, including me, just started laughing, which was actually really good. And we got a lot done in that meeting, looking for ways to recognize and reward people who were doing their best to do the right thing. Now, as I say that, I am not eliminating the importance of having behavior linked to compensation whenever possible. So, I have worked with clients where we have built in some metrics and measures into performance plans for managers and directors and VPs and officers of the company. I think that is important. But that percentage, if you're in, a large organization, that is only going to touch a small percentage of people. And so if we want to make sure that we have some accountability at all levels of the organization, then we have to go about it in a slightly different way. So that's the Achieving Inclusion model. It makes for a really robust conversation about what is needed. And one of the things that I try to remember whenever I'm introducing people to this model, I try to remember to say this. It's easy for us, the way that our brains have been socialized to work, it's easy for us to look at the model and go, oh, there are 4 quadrants. So we need to design a strategy where 25% is on awareness, 25% is on alignment, 25% is on action, 25% is on accountability. But that would not be correct. Wherever you are on the continuum of developing, maintaining, or upgrading your strategy, at different points along the way, you actually will want to prioritize different segments. Sure, it's going to add up to 100%. But for example, if you are creating a new strategy for inclusion, you can't start with accountability because you have not prepared people. They don't have the awareness, right? They don't have the information. They don't have the awareness. They probably don't have the alignment with why this is important to the business. And you have not had a period of time to develop or to track actions. So you would have maybe accountability at 10% of your overall focus, and awareness and alignment might together be 60% of your focus, and 30% on actions in your first year or even 2. But let's take a client I'm working with now. They have had 15 years of implementing, revising, growing organizational commitment. And right now, their need for awareness is really very limited as they hire new people. They've built in some awareness into orientation, into onboarding, et cetera, et cetera. So for them, awareness is probably 10 or 15%. Alignment still has a big chunk because in alignment with the industry they are in, this is a place where they have to spend a lot of time, even with existing people, because it's so easy for folks to think it's a political initiative and not take into consideration all of the industry reasons, industry related reasons that this is so important. And they need to give specific examples. And then action is built in not only to DEI training and events, but it's built into management training. It's built into skills. It's built into some functional areas along the way in terms of development. And the managers, directors, and VPs have specific actions that they are held accountable for that are related to educating employees who report to them about this topic. And so as a result, they're at a stage where accountability, they have different accountability standards for people in the organization at different levels and in different functional areas. And the work that I'm doing with them is helping them communicate some of that and to revise some standards that were created pre-pandemic into the way that they operate now, because it's very different. So we're working on reinventing or upgrading their accountability, but their accountability standards and processes are probably about 35% of the attention in their overall strategy. But they could not have started there 15 years ago. So keep that in mind when you think about, even if you're just thinking about yourself personally, what do I need to be aware of? How does that align with what I am expected to accomplish? What actions do I want to take? And how will I hold myself accountable? That's the Achieving Inclusion model. And it has a lot of flexibility, a lot of ways that you can use it in your organization to diagnose what's going on, or to just have a healthy conversation that doesn't get distracted by politics or personalities, because you have a framework to say, what are we doing organizationally? And it has helped me a lot as I go in and out of so many different kinds of organizations, to be able to say, in this organization, which one of these is going to be your primary focus? And then we can talk about the specific way that we execute on that. It's no surprise that, and no real, well, surprise is the word that keeps coming to mind. It's no surprise that with a company named Intentional Inclusion, I would be very much focused on how organizations can be intentional and what is the framework that will help them do that. Let me know if this model makes sense to you and if it can be useful to you, because many clients have found it to be useful for them. I'm really happy that you are participating in the Achieving Inclusion Summit. And I hope these tips that are spread throughout each day are giving you more to think about and more that you can actually use. And if there are any specific questions that you have that I can answer for you, then please just stay connected at any one of these websites, tracybrown.com for intentional inclusion, stainedglassspirit.net for diversity and inclusion work in spiritual communities, and whatisminetodo.com with a specific focus on answering the question, what is mine to do to interrupt or end race-based hatred and violence? That's all I've got for you. I hope that's really helpful, a model that you can use. Please stay tuned for the upcoming session later today with Kimberly Yolanda Williams and her book, Dear White Woman, Please Come Home. And then tomorrow we'll be talking with Dr. Christopher Meltzer and Sima Lieberman from Everyday Conversations on Race for Everyday People. My name is Tracy Brown. So happy that you are participating in the summit. And I will see you in a couple of hours.